Welcome to the fourth of our panel discussions and interactive segments on domestic violence as part of our 16 days of activism at the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. So today we have three panelists along with the Honorable Minister, who will, Dr. Vindhya Persaud, who will be speaking to you guys on some of the issues relating and surrounding around domestic violence locally. So to my immediate left is the head psychologist at the Georgetown Public Hospital, Mr. Balogun Osunyibi. To his left is the Honorable Minister of Social Security, Human Services and Social Security, Dr. Vindhya Persaud. To her left is Attorney at Law Anuradha Persaud and Program Coordinator of the Spotlight Initiative. And to her left is Ms. Juliet Smith, the Administrative Assistant of the Childcare and Protection Agency. To begin, we'd like to ask the Honorable Minister to give a few words to start proceedings.
Thank you very much, Romario. Good morning, panelists, everyone gathered here, members of the media. This, as was mentioned, is the first of a series of panel discussions that the ministry will be holding in a number of our regions. It is our intention from the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security to observe this period of 16 days of activism in a very personal way. And this is why, much as you are here this morning, across the country, we will be having similar gatherings, because I know in our drive of public awareness, while we want to get information out, equally too, it is important to listen to everyone's perspective, to have the opportunity to share experiences, and more importantly, to have an insight into the peculiar circumstances that each one of you face every day in life, or you would have dealt with at particular situations within your own life, so that it can help us to harness the best of everyone to develop the community of passionate advocates against domestic violence. In our own country, the numbers remain worrying. We have 55% of women who would have experienced some form of violence in their life, usually in a relationship setting. When we look at our country, we know sometimes many people are not aware of the opportunities and the avenues of support that exist. And also, quite disturbing too, there may not be that support structure at home, in your circle or in their circle, and among family members and community. And that is why it is crucial that as we move forward, we have more of an idea of where the gaps are, so that those gaps can be addressed, so that more and more people understand what the ministry is offering, whether it's the 914 hotline or it is access to our counselors, whether they be survivors advocates or our social service officers. But the intention in all of this is to let people know that they are not alone. And the bigger intention is to push our country into a reporting mode where they will very easily, without having to think too much, utilize the 914 hotline to not only report personal cases of violence, but violence that they see in the communities. Later on in the week, or next week, we will be launching the Community Advocates Network. I want to let you know about this. This is going to be a formidable network in our country where anyone who feels passionately, so passionately, they want to be an advocate against domestic violence, they want to be a support to people who are experiencing domestic violence, they can be a part of this network. And so I want to let you know this is going to happen in the hope that you too will be a part of it. You may not realize, but it is not only the reporting framework that we are looking at, but the very important roles that everyone plays in their home, the messages that they can give to young people, the way in which they resolve conflict, and importantly, not only that they resolve conflict in that silo, but the young people in their homes looking on at the manner in which they resolve conflict, it will be a learning experience for them, especially if conflict is dealt with through dialogue and discussion and not through fists and violence. Very often, we hear of violence being meted out behind closed doors very often, and people keep it behind closed door because of fear of stigma, fear of judgment from family and the wider society. These are the things that we have to change, and change quickly. If we are to get to the root of the problem, people should not see, turn a blind eye, or not help. Because every woman who would have managed to extricate herself from a violent situation, it would have taken her a long time because that support was not readily forthcoming. People are afraid to say that this is happening because they feel as if it's a failure on their part, and we have to change that. It is no failure. And people sometimes do not recognize cases of violence like emotional violence, emotional abuse, financial violence, financial abuse, because no one talks about it. And so I think the panelists today will be able to not only give you their presentations, but importantly, answer your questions. So in this very small way, in this very important engagement, I hope you will find much to benefit from. And you have the commitment from me and from the entire team at the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. We will not rest. We will continue to work tirelessly until we manage to deliver effective, efficient services, and we manage to provide the kind of support that is needed for those persons who experience violence and abuse. I want to say right now, it's not a task that is only ours and should not be seen as only ours. It is such a monumental task. It is such an onerous thing to want to do that we need everyone's help, which includes all of you. So I hope that you will join us in this movement, not only as globally they orange the world, but equally so in Guyana as we say enough with the violence. I thank you very much for listening to me this morning, and I hope that the discussion bears a lot of fruit. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you, Ministers, for bringing us up to speed. But in addition to the 914 and COP squad training, the Ministry has also been engaging residents and communities on how to deal with domestic violence. Most recently, last month, the Ministry was in Region 3, where 35 residents were trained on how to deal with domestic violence. Also, their studies show that domestic violence is directly linked to alcoholism and poverty and drug abuse. Some of those issues are immediate problems that Guyanese face on a day-to-day basis, and we want to break that cycle so our future generations could know how to deal with it and end domestic violence completely. And someone who knows a lot about children and how to deal with and their effects on children is Miss Juliet Smith, who could give us a few words on domestic violence as it relates to this aspect.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. There are some things that contribute to violence in Guyana. There are some norms. And one of it that we need to look at is how we treat boys and girls. Usually we have this mentality that boys are more outgoing and they should be the ones to have the education and things like that. We have come a far way in Guyana, but there's still more work to be done. The effects of violence on children is immense. You might not see them right away, but down the line, and then we have this cycle that goes on. Our minister spoke about support. You have the support. We have the ministry, we have our council, and sometimes you don't know because your parents would have done it one way. And you came in and you saw it that way and you continued that way. Your father or your mother would have been abused and you're thinking that's all right, but that's not okay. You can have help. There's sometimes you don't know how to do it, but you can call. We have many numbers that you can call. We have counseling, the Childcare and Protection Agency. Our ministry has probation officers. If you don't know how to do it on your own, you can contact us. We can help you because the effects of violence are against, it doesn't affect only the partners. The children in the setting are affected too. And if we want to have stronger communities, stronger nation, we need to work together. The minister spoke a lot about support. It's very important. Support each other. Let us start from you. It starts from us. We're saying it's not going to go on anymore. It's going to stop with me. Even if it happened with my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, it's not going to happen with us. We are going to stop it. Okay, we're going to continue to support each other, be advocates. Men, look out for our women folk. They are valuable. Let's look out for them. Let's be a loving family. And we see how far that would go in making a very good nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pereira Smith.
You're most welcome.
You mentioned that a lot of services are there to help people in dealing with these issues, and so the ministry back in April launched its virtual help desk, where persons could message the ministry directly from Facebook and have direct access to maybe a social worker or someone who specializes in some of their problems that they would be facing. In addition to alcoholism and poverty, generational experiences often help to further enhance or increase the percentage of domestic violence that we are facing in this country. And maybe it could be a mental thing. So Dr. Balogun Osunyibi specializes in psychology, and he would be able to tell us better on how domestic violence comes from a mental perspective. Mr. Balogun.
Thank you very much, Romario. I wish to acknowledge the Honorable Minister, Dr. Vindhya. I had to catch myself a second there because she's always Dr. Vindhya to me for years. So all protocols being applicable here, Honorable Minister Dr. Vindhya Persaud. And I want to acknowledge her not merely because she's the minister, but because over the years since I've known her, this has been one of her signal contributions to the well-being and the goodness of Guyana. And by that I mean working with people in communities on the ground. And this has been going on for years. You know, sometimes only when you die then people say what good you did. And when you're alive, they only say what bad you have done. So I want to make sure that while she's alive, she's here, that I can acknowledge her contribution. She has supported me from a distance in my own work and in my efforts in mental health, particularly in the field of suicide prevention here in Guyana. So I want to acknowledge that, Honorable Minister. And I'm a senior clinical psychologist. I'm also a forensic and criminal psychologist. So my look at violence, any form of violence, will be somewhat different from other panelists here. Because my look, the lens which I look at violence, is based on cognition, thinking, and based on behavior. So immediately, if we're talking about violence, and in this instance, domestic violence, we're saying that there's abnormality that has been manifest in that relationship and in that environment. And moreover, the environment and the relationship has become toxic. Whether who caused it, first, second, last, that's a whole other debate. The other thing about what we call domestic violence, and Romario actually gave me a cue because I had it in mind to say, I presently have a patient. These are well-to-do people. You know, usually people think it's only poor people who suffer this. These are well-to-do people. They hold dual citizenship. You know, these are people who have achieved in life. But what do we have? We have in one partner someone whose mom basically migrated years ago, left them with a sibling to look after. Sibling didn't have time. So what we're talking about there is family rejection and discard. And so that person does not know now how to treat with their wife. And so there's these constant issues. Because if you didn't learn this, we talk about modeling and role models. If you didn't learn this, how do you relate to a female, your mom, your aunt, etc., your sister? It's going to be difficult when you're under emotional distress for you to relate to your partner later in life. And there's a recent study that came out. Everybody knows Saturday Night Live. There was a skit based on that study, the cause of loneliness for men, and you can go and look it up, where they put this man in a park, put all these people around him and had them remove one by one until this man was really lost. And one of the things that we find clinically when we examine cases where there's been domestic violence and we're treating with those patients is that men cannot take rejection. And the reason why they can't take rejection, there are some psychological reasons. Because they find it hard to form relationships and keep relationships. So what happens, only the intimate relationship in their view is of any significance. So if you're cutting that off from them, like the woman says, oh, I'm leaving, that is perceived as a threat. And men has been biologically hardwired and neurologically hardwired over thousands of years of going to war and battling and so on to respond to threats aggressively. So you have to have an understanding of the behaviors involved. One of the other things about domestic violence is that, and we see this a lot in patient care. So I give you an example. So someone is ill and the family members come to the hospital to visit them and maybe brings a dish that they think would be appreciated. And that male patient just hit the soup down or throw it in the bin or something. So if you're a nurse or a doctor, you'd say, well, you should be glad that people are bringing stuff to you. You know, I mean, you should be glad you get a visit. But psychologically, something has occurred there. And what has occurred is this. I'll try to explain it in layman terms. People who are not doing well, having any form of illness, whether it be a psychological disorder or any other one, people who are traumatized, and you know this because you know the cliche, hurt people, do not like people who appear or present themselves as being whole more than they are. That too is and usually can be perceived as a threat. So because that person is lying there in that bed, they can't move, you know, they're incapacitated for some reason, the very fact that their wives and daughters and other family members are coming and, you know, they push them away, man, leave me alone, I'm going to be fine, stop fussing over me. So you say, well, they should be glad. But no, psychologically, they perceive that. Remember, perception is interpretation. That this person is in a better position and is lording it over them. And the same thing happens in many of these instances of domestic violence. People will report that the man always says to the woman, you think you are better than me. And so because he's thinking that, he will look for an avenue to find a way to make you not better than him. Now, how does he achieve that? He has to cause damages. And that's why there are more often hits and strikes to the face than to any other part of the body. All these are psychological facts I'm laying out. Why? Because he has perceived that it's your face, your looks, that makes you better than him. Because you still be attractive to someone else. And there you hear the retort, when I finish with you, no man will want you. Those things are not being said in a vacuum. Even if the person who's saying it does not understand the psychological significance from which they're saying it, it still remains alarming things to have occurred. So the issue of domestic violence I wish to offer is really the issue of dysfunction, whether in the relationship itself or in one or both parties in that relationship. And where the perpetrator of the violence stands, there's a lot of dysfunction in that person. And, you know, sometimes we say, oh, you need to seek help. You need, say, a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a social worker. But really and truly, the person needs to seek help. There are so many psychological conditions which I can lay out that is afoot in all of these behaviors and all of these acts, even if the violence is only verbal. Again, you know, Freud talked about ego states. You're jostling for superiority and dominance. Now, who do you want to dominate? If you try to dominate a friend or a stranger, they will stop hanging out with you and they will go away and leave you. But if you do that with your wife, she's not going anywhere. So you have a ripe target in front of you. You get the point I'm making? So sometimes people ask me, but why do they hurt the people that love them? And the simple answer is because you're the closest to them. Because if they go try that on the road with another man, he may give 2 uppercuts in return. You understand? These behaviors have meanings and they have significance. So I just wanted to break it down as low as I can like that. And you're free to ask me any other question. And I'll try to give you a better explanation if you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Osunyibi, for that insightful presentation. Recent studies would have shown that before the pandemic, 1 in 3 women would have been suffering abuse. However, since at the start of the pandemic, that statistic has now risen to 2 in every 3 women. Interestingly though, 1 in every 10 would report to the police acts of domestic violence. And often we see in Guyana, a woman might get beaten from her husband. She gone to the station and make a report. The police come, the police beat you up, lock you up. Time for court and the woman says she ain't want to press charges. So, in dealing with the legal aspect of how to deal with domestic violence is attorney at law, Ms. Anuradha Persaud.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge my fellow panelists, Dr. Persaud, Dr. Osunyibi, and Childcare and Protection Officer, Ms. Smith. I am an attorney at law, which means that before I was in this position, I practiced as a lawyer, going to courts. And one of the things we see the most, I just wanted to make sure that you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. One of the things we see the most with going to court is that because of the lengthy delays in hearing some of the domestic violence applications, by the time the restraining order is ready to be made permanent, the persons change their minds, or they make her back, or some family member talked to them, or some religious leader spoke to them and they gone home back. And the statistics shows that it takes a woman 9 tries before she leaves an abusive relationship. And many times in Guyana, she dies before that 9th try at the hands of her abuser. And this is partly, and what contributes to it is the social and cultural norms that exist in our communities. One of them being that what everybody gonna say, what this person gonna say, what your neighbor gonna say, what this auntie gonna say. Even in other situations outside of abuse, our society tends to judge one another. You know, they talk, this one call up this one, they say X, Y, and Z, and it makes you feel ashamed of your situation, as if it's your fault, that you don't want to bring shame on your family, you don't want your mother or father to have to hide their face when they walk into the market, when they talk to their friends, when they call X, Y, and Z overseas. And also, many women feel a way about speaking about these things with others because you chose this person to be with. It was your choice to marry them. It was your choice to move in with them. It was your choice to have a relationship with them. And also many times against the advice of your friends, your parents, and whoever else. Many times, persons who are outside of you, your friends and your family, will see that abusive behavior before you see it. And you outside in the goodness of your own heart, loving this person, probably gonna be like, you know what, I love him, he's not like that, y'all don't know him, and then go ahead against the best advice of everybody else and marry him anyways. And now for you to go and say, mommy, he hit me, or daddy, he said this to me, or I need help, it takes a lot out of you because you don't want to be wrong. However, it is not only your family and friends you have to turn to. The ministry has realized that this is a huge gap in the support system, and because of that, we now have the 914 hotline. And one of the services accessible through the 914 hotline is what recently we have hired the survivors advocates. So coming to the legal part now, what is your legal remedy? Of course, you'll have to find somewhere to go. And many times you cannot go to your own parents' house because, as one of my friend's parents told her, once you leave this house with your husband, you can't come back without him. So you need somewhere to go. The ministry has a lot of shelters and what we call halfway homes. We help the survivors advocates is a person who will help you to advocate for your rights. Will help you to find somewhere to stay. Will help you to find a job. Ensure you have proper clothes, and you have the essential tools to survive, at least until you can start to earn enough on your own to protection for you. It's about the victim. So some of the orders or the protection that the Domestic Violence Act provides is what we call a protection order. And a protection order basically is an order by the court ordering the perpetrator or anybody who enables the perpetrator to stay away from you. they'll have a certain amount of feet, and there are also other things they can order them to not do. If you live in the same house, they can order them to not verbally abuse you, sexually abuse you, financially abuse you. There are many other remedies that they can be ordered against. One of the most prevalent ones we see outside of the physical violence is the cyberbullying. Many men go on Facebook and they write, she got this man, she got that man, and that's the first thing they're about to say on Facebook. And then they'll accuse you with so many other people. That is defamation, and it's also cyberbullying. We have the Cybercrime Act. You can make a report to the police station, and this is another thing that the Survivors Advocate can help you to do. Go to the police station, and you don't need a lawyer to do any of these things. You can go to any police station and they will help you, or you can call 914 and connect yourself with a Survivors Advocate to help to get a protection order, or to ensure that you make a report about any one of these acts of violence that is committed against you. Outside of getting a protection order, you absolutely must report any acts of violence to the police, because it might be the 10th time you now go in and report to the police, and the 11th time he kill you, and there's no pattern of events for the prosecutors that may come afterwards to establish that this man was beating you up all the time. There's a big difference between murder and manslaughter, and reporting acts to the police, even if you decide you don't want to pursue it, is important. So what I'm going to encourage you today to do is call 914 and to report the acts of violence to the police, however they may be. And if you find you go to the police station and they refuse to take your report, please call 914 and tell them they've refused to take your report. Also, we have some brochures behind there where our probation officer is, with a lot of literature on how to access these services. And again, call 914. It's totally free. They can tell you how to access all of these services and more. Thank you very much for listening to me.
And we are also, finally on my side, going to be putting the GBV app out there. That GBV app is going to be on everyone's phone who has a smartphone. I want to encourage... It's up? It's up. Right. So on the smartphone, or that means Android, iPhone, whichever, you have a panic button. If you can't speak, put your location on. Press panic and it goes to the 914 hotline. It can find you. Then there's information there. So there are lots of new bits of technology we're using to support what we have. But everybody should know about 914, the app, very importantly, and share it with another sister or brother who you think needs it so they can use it. As I said, nothing is perfect, because at the end of everything, a person is. And it depends on how committed that person is to what they're supposed to do. And we can manage, we can cajole, we can encourage, we can do all kinds of things to make that person perform at their maximum. But at the end of the day, we rely on people across the country to do what they're supposed to do in the interest of everybody. But I want to tell you, as long as I'm sitting here, you have a committed human being. I've seen it out there enough to know how bad it is. And I'm going to try my best. Physically, I can't do it all. So that's why we wanted to do these kinds of things, so that we have more hands. More hands, we can do it. So I want to say thank you to all of you for being candid this morning, for being so open that I was able to gain, and for being a part of this discussion. And at this point, I hand over back to Romario, who I've unashamedly been talking to.
Well, we have time for one more question, if there's anybody who would like to ask. If not, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and extend thanks to our panelists sharing some insightful information. I know all of us would have gained from this discussion, and hopefully it's not the last, and we would now be extending to every region within Guyana, or most of it, that is. Thank you all for coming.